My name is Tori. I am 31 years old. I was standing in the grand ballroom of Casa Loma, Toronto's famous Gothic castle. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over 200 of the city's most elite socialites. Waiters in crisp white jackets circulated with trays of vintage champagne. At the center of the room, holding a microphone and wiping a perfectly timed tear from his eye, was my husband, David. To my beautiful wife, Tori, David said, his voice thick with practiced emotion, these past 5 years have been the greatest of my life. Even when my business hit rock bottom, you were my rock. You are the reason I am still standing. The crowd awed. Several women dabbed their eyes. David raised his glass to me, the picture of a devoted, vulnerable husband who had just survived a brutal corporate bankruptcy. It was a flawless performance, worthy of an Oscar. Have you ever trusted someone with your entire life, only to find out they were actively destroying it behind your back? Tell me your story in the comments. Because today, I made my husband pay for every single lie. I smiled back at David. I raised my glass. I didn't cry. David thought he was a genius. He thought his strategy of financial gaslighting had worked perfectly. He thought I was just his quiet, supportive wife who was about to sign away her $3 million childhood home in Oakville to save him from ruin. He forgot one crucial detail. Before I was his wife, I was a forensic auditor. I hunt white-collar criminals for a living. And David, he was about to learn that you never ever invite an auditor to a party funded by stolen money. When I met David 6 years ago, he was a charismatic tech entrepreneur. He was loud, ambitious, and consumed every room he walked into. Psychologists call it narcissistic supply. The need for constant admiration. At the time, I thought it was just confidence. I was the opposite. I was a forensic auditor for a top firm on Bay Street. I lived in spreadsheets, analyzing SWIFT codes and tracking offshore tax evasion. I was quiet, observant, and stable. I was the anchor to his soaring balloon. 2 years into our marriage, my mother passed away, leaving me her fully paid-off home in Oakville. It was my safety net, my sanctuary. Then 6 months ago, David came home looking like a ghost. He collapsed onto our sofa, burying his face in his hands. "It's gone, Tori," he sobbed. "The startup. The investors pulled out. The market crashed. I'm bankrupt. We are $800,000 in debt. And if I don't pay the creditors by the end of the month, they are going to seize everything." I held him. I comforted him. I asked to see the paperwork, but he snapped at me. "Don't audit me, Tori," he yelled, his face suddenly red with rage. "I'm your husband, not a criminal. I need your support, not your interrogation. If you just co-sign a loan against the Oakville house, I can save the company. If you love me, you'll do it." It was classic manipulation, shifting the blame, making me feel guilty for asking basic logical questions. He called me paranoid. He called me cold. He printed the loan documents and left them on the kitchen island, a home equity line of credit for $1.2 million. All it needed was my signature. I stood in the dark kitchen staring at the paper. Most spouses would sign it blindly to save their marriage. But in my profession, blind trust is the fastest route to bankruptcy. I didn't grab a pen, I grabbed my laptop. I started my investigation at 2 a.m. while David was supposedly sleeping off the stress in the guest room. I bypassed his personal laptop. He wasn't stupid enough to leave evidence there. Instead, I went straight to the public corporate registries and the dark web database tools I use for my federal cases. I began mapping the financial arteries of his company, Novatech Solutions. It took me 72 hours of relentless digging to break through his corporate firewall. What I found didn't just break my heart, it made my blood run ice cold. David's company wasn't bankrupt. It was highly profitable. The losses, he reported, were actually massive wire transfers being sent to a shell company in Belize called Apex Holdings. He was deliberately bleeding his own company dry, hiding the profits offshore, and preparing to declare personal bankruptcy to avoid paying his investors. But it got worse. I traced the outgoing funds from Apex Holdings back into Canada. The money was being funneled into a private real estate trust. 2 months ago, that trust purchased a $2 million luxury penthouse in Yorkville, Toronto's most expensive neighbourhood. I pulled the utility records for the penthouse. The electricity bill was registered to a woman named Chloe Vance. Chloe was a 24-year-old lifestyle influencer. I found her Instagram profile. It was public. It was a gallery of designer bags, first-class flights, and photos taken inside the Yorkville penthouse. And in the background of a photo posted just last week, reflecting in the mirrored closet doors, was David. He wasn't drowning in debt. He was drowning in his own ego. He wanted to keep his new mistress, keep his hidden millions in Belize, and force me to mortgage my dead mother's house to fund his exit strategy. Once I signed that loan, he would drain the cash, file for divorce, and leave me with $1 million debt while he lived like a king in Yorkville. I sat in the glow of my monitors. I didn't shed a single tear. The woman who loved David died in that chair at 4 a.m. The forensic auditor took over. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. When you are dealing with a narcissist, screaming only gives them the emotional reaction they crave. Instead, I spent the next TWO months smiling. I told him I needed time to process the paperwork. I cooked his favorite meals. I helped him organize our extravagant 5th anniversary party, a party he insisted on throwing to keep up appearances for his investors. And while he was busy picking out champagne for the gala, I was busy picking apart his life. I contacted my colleagues at the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency. I quietly handed over the entire dossier of his Belize shell companies. I also reached out to the primary investors of Novatech, providing them with irrefutable proof of his embezzlement. But my masterpiece was the Yorkville penthouse. David thought he was clever using a trust to buy it, but he used marital funds, money from our joint accounts, to pay the initial retainer. Under Ontario family law, that made it a marital asset. I hired a shark of a lawyer. We filed a quiet ex parte motion. The judge froze the trust and granted me an emergency lien on the property. David owned nothing, but he didn't know it yet. Back in the grand ballroom of Casa Loma, the applause died down. David smiled at the crowd, lowering the microphone. He looked at me, expecting me to walk up, kiss his cheek, and play the role of the devoted, tragic wife. I walked up to the stage. I took the microphone from his hand. My black silk dress rustled in the silence. "Thank you, David," I said. My voice echoed through the massive stone room. 5 years is a milestone. It's a time for reflection, a time for truth. I looked out at the sea of faces. Many of them were David's investors, the very people he was stealing from. David has spoken beautifully about our struggles, I continued. He told you all that Novatech is bankrupt. He told me that we were destitute. He even asked me to mortgage my late mother's home to save him. David frowned. This wasn't the script. "Tori, honey, not here." "But you see," I interrupted, my voice sharpening like a blade. "I have a confession to make. I have a condition. Psychologists call it the sunk cost fallacy. It's when you invest so much time into a mistake, you refuse to walk away. I almost fell for it. But luckily, I prefer math." I gestured to the AV technician at the back of the room, a man I had paid an extra $500 before the party. The massive projection screen behind the stage, which was supposed to show our wedding video, suddenly flickered to life. It didn't show a wedding. It showed a high-resolution PDF of a SWIFT bank transfer. "This," I said, pointing at the screen, "is a wire transfer for SIX $100,000, sent from Novatech to a shell company in Belize called Apex Holdings." The ballroom went deathly quiet. A low murmur rippled through the tables where the investors sat. David's face lost all its color. He stepped forward, his hands shaking. "Turn that off! Tori, what is wrong with you? She's having a mental breakdown," he yelled to the crowd. "Gaslighting won't work tonight, David," I said calmly. "Next slide, please." The screen changed. It showed the deed to the Yorkville penthouse, followed by a massive, full-color Instagram photo of Chloe Vance, posing with David in the reflection of a mirror. "This is Chloe," I announced to the room, "David's 24-year-old mistress, and this is the $2 million penthouse he bought for her, using the money he told you all was lost in the market crash." Chaos erupted. Two of the lead investors stood up, their faces purple with fury. "You stole from us, you son of a bitch!" one of them screamed, throwing his napkin on the table. David was hyperventilating. The narcissistic mask had completely shattered. He looked like a trapped animal. "It's fake. She forged it. I'm ruined. I don't have a dime." I turned to him. I lowered the microphone, speaking just loudly enough for him to hear over the shouting crowd. "You are absolutely right, David. You don't have a dime." I pulled a thick blue envelope from my clutch and pressed it into his trembling chest. Because yesterday a judge granted me full control of the Yorkville Trust. I legally seized the condo. Chloe was served with a TWENTY 4-hour eviction notice this morning. "And these are divorce papers. You get nothing." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. You can't do this. I'll destroy you." "You can't destroy an auditor, David," I whispered. "We already read the fine print." Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. 3 officers from the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit walked in, their badges shining under the chandeliers. They walked straight up to the stage. "David Miller," the lead officer said, "you are under arrest for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion." David tried to step back, but he tripped over the microphone stand. He fell hard onto the polished wood floor. There was no dignity left, no charm, just a pathetic lying man being pulled to his feet and handcuffed in front of everyone he had ever tried to impress. As they walked him out, the ballroom was dead silent. I stood alone on the stage. I took a sip of my champagne. It tasted perfect. It's been 8 months since the gala at Casa Loma. The divorce was finalized quickly. Because David was facing federal prison time and his assets were frozen, his high-priced lawyers abandoned him. He had nothing to fight with. I sold the Yorkville penthouse and used the funds to repay the investors he had scammed. It was the right thing to do. Chloe, the mistress, tried to launch a podcast about being manipulated. It failed. She moved back in with her parents. David is currently serving a 7-year sentence. The man who needed constant admiration and luxury now wears a standard issue jumpsuit and is told when to eat and when to sleep. The ultimate nightmare for a narcissist. My childhood home in Oakville is safe. I sit on the back porch now, watching the autumn leaves fall over the garden. People ask me if it hurt, if spending 2 months pretending to love a man I knew was betraying me broke my spirit. It didn't, because betrayal is just a data point. It's an anomaly in the ledger of your life. You don't cry over a corrupted file, you isolate it, you extract the usable data, and you delete the virus permanently. My name is Tori. I am a forensic auditor. Stay sharp. Trust the math, not the tears. And never let a liar tell you what you are worth.